Can you guys hear me now? Wait, can you guys hear me now? I know it came in and left because I checked my other settings. Aha! Okay, perfect. Yeah, I know what happened. I didn't add the audio capture to the new scene. So also adding audio output capture. Cool. Hold on. Just going ahead and, okay, finalizing that. Okay, cool. Sorry about that. I set up a new setup so this way it wouldn't mess with the configuration that we have for Hatoful Boyfriend, but and the games in general, but unfortunately that means that there were certain things that I forgot to add back in. Do you have a... Gotta figure out my directions first. Have a copy of your book already? It's okay if you don't, because we'll go ahead and, I'm going to read it out loud, so you guys can follow along if you have a copy. If not, you can just listen to the sound of my relaxing voice. I guess I can give it a couple of minutes before we start. Maybe start around 5:15. Just make sure everybody who wants to join gets a chance to. No problem, that's fine too. How's everybody doing today? There's much better weather outside here today than it was yesterday. Well, so it wasn't bad yesterday, but it was cloudy at first, and then I think it got better briefly, and then got cloudy again, I believe. And rainy. Cool. Oh, I'm glad it's nice out there too. Today, I feel like it was gray when I woke up, but then quickly cleared up to being nice and sunshiny. So even if I'm not out there, looking out at the window is like beautiful. Yeah. Anything special going on where you guys are? Sorry that you were feeling bad before. I'm glad you're all better now. Much nicer. It's weird, like I still feel like a little bit nasally from... I'm wondering if it was from yesterday, because yesterday it was all rainy and gross. I'm wondering if like I'm feeling nasally, like a little off like that, or if it's just from having done the voice acting the other day. Yesterday. The other day known as yesterday. I'm doing okay in general though, so... Okay. Yeah, I mean like, it's not bothering me enough that like I wouldn't be able to read or anything. I hear a mourning dove outside. It's Nageki. Oh, you know, it's a good idea. Because, hey, listen, Nageki can sort of be our mascot, because he loves reading, too, you know? Like, that would work for this. That would totally work for this. Hold on, I have an idea. I got our little guy. And I'm gonna put him, hold on, I'm gonna take out my headphones for a second. And I'm gonna put him right there at the end of the bed. Let's see if he's visible. He is! Oh, that's really... like, he's not as prominent as I would like him to be, but... But he's here. He's here with us. See? Our little cute nerd bird sitting in. Uh-huh. Our cute little nerd bird sitting in on some literary times. I'd put him on a shelf, but then he'd be harder to, like, I have rabbit fur, every rabbit, so just, like, floating through the air here. Yeah, I'd put him on the shelf or something, but at the same time, like, he wouldn't fit there. He'd probably be on, like, the second shelf, and it's just, I'll leave him right here, being more front and center, or, like, off to the left, or off to the... I don't know how you guys are seeing this, if it looks like left or right. For me, it's my right. But off that way. Mm-hmm. He does belong there. Oh, I should put the chat on, too. Let me double check to see if I can figure that out. Hold on one second. Pardon the... how do I do this again? Oh, it's a widget. Okay. Okay. Sorry, you guys are just seeing some maintenance as I'm setting up this stuff. So we're gonna do the chat box. Yup. Add source. And hopefully it's gonna come up with the same style that it does on I'm wondering where it's gonna come up actually, now that I think about it. Can someone type something? I just want to see. Like, where that will pop up. Ah, okay, I see it. It's a... Ooh. I hope... Wait, actually, over here. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna leave it where it had been. That's actually a good idea. Does it look good there? Do you want it to be bigger, do you think? It should be showing. Yeah. Do you want it to be, like, wider? I think wider, right? Yeah. I'll just bring it up, like, proportionately. How's that? Okay. Cool. All right. So he thinks of everything. All right, cool. So there we go, and I believe we're ready to start. So let me just go, and I have our book right here. And let's check it out. So, the Midnight Library. by Matt Haig. We can go ahead and, oh, cool. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is, I imagine that everyone's books books are going to have different blurbs. I've seen a couple of them pop up online, so I think that there are a couple of different layouts of the book floating around there. So let me just go ahead and read what's on the back. Oh, cool. Alright, cool. So it says, "Between life and death there is a library," she said, "and within that library the shelves go on for forever. Every book provides a chance to try another life you could have lived, to see how things would be if you had made other choices. Would you have done anything different? If you had the chance to undo your regrets?" Ooh, I see Neil Gaiman has given praise. I really like... Neil Gaiman is one of my favorite authors who's done stories like Stardust and Coraline, The Graveyard Book. He's even written some comics as well, and I believe he's... I don't know if he's done the screenplay for a couple of shows, but I know he's had a couple of his works be adapted to the screen. Hold on just 1 second. Okay. All right. Yeah, and then if we start at the very beginning of the book, there is a little inscription to all the healthcare workers, or to all the health workers and the care workers. Thank you. So, I'm wondering if this was published. It was published 2020. That makes sense. And then we have a quote from Sylvia Plath. Kind of depressing poet, but a famous poet. I can never be all the people I want and live all the lives I want. I can never train myself in all the skills I want. And why do I want? I want to live and feel all the shades, tones, and variations of mental and physical experience possible in my life. Okay. So we start off... Oh, this is going to be interesting, because it doesn't seem to be broken up in chapters. Going into this blind, guys. What we start off on now is a conversation about rain. 19 years before she decided to die, Nora Seed sat in the warmth of the small library at Hazeldean School in the town of Bedford. She sat at a low table, staring at a chessboard. "Nora, dear, it's natural to worry about your future," said the librarian, Mrs. Elm, her eyes twinkling. Mrs. Elm made her first move, a knight hopping over the next row of white pawns. "Of course you're going to be worried about the exams. But you could be anything you want to be, Nora. Think of all that possibility. It's exciting." "Yes, I suppose it is. A whole life in front of you. A whole life. You could do anything, live anywhere. Somewhere a bit less cold and wet." Nora pushed a pawn forward 2 spaces. It was hard not to compare Mrs. Elm to her mother, who treated Nora like a mistake in need of correction. For instance, when she was a baby, her mother had been so worried Nora's left ear stuck out more than her right that she'd used sticky tape to address the situation, then disguised it beneath a woolen bonnet. "I hate the cold and wet," added Mrs. Elm for emphasis. Mrs. Elm had short gray hair and a kind and mildly crinkled oval face, sitting pale above her turtle-green polo neck. She was quite old, but she was also the person most on Nora's wavelength in the entire school, and even on days when it wasn't raining, she would spend her afternoon break in the small library. "Coldness and wetness don't always go together," Nora told her. "Antarctica is the driest continent on Earth. Technically, it's a desert. Well, that sounds up your street. I don't think it's far enough away. Well, maybe you should be an astronaut. Travel the galaxy. Nora smiled. The rain is even worse on other planets. Worse than Bedfordshire? On Venus it is pure acid. Mrs. Elm pulled a paper tissue from her sleeve and delicately blew her nose. See? With a brain like yours, you can do anything. A blond boy Nora recognized from a couple of years below her ran past, outside the rain-speckled window, either chasing someone or being chased. Since her brother had left, she'd felt a bit unguarded out there. The library was a little shelter of civilization. Dad thinks I've thrown everything away. Now I've stopped swimming. Well, far be it from me to say, but there is more to this world than swimming really fast. There are many different possible lives ahead of you. Like I said last week, you could be a glaciologist. I've been researching and it was then that the phone rang. 1 minute, said Mrs. Elm softly. I better get that. A moment later, Nora watched Mrs. Elm on the phone. Yes, she's here now. The librarian's face fell in shock. She turned away from Nora, but her words were audible across the hushed room. Oh, no. No. Oh, my God. Of course. I mean, is the whole, like, other planets could be worse than here, yeah. Is that saying, or, like, saying, like, other places are rainier than here, is that really pessimistic? I feel like that's more like, here's not so bad. I guess it's like a kind of glass half empty, glass half full. We're on 19 years later. The man at the door. 27 hours before she decided to die, Nora Seed sat on her dilapidated sofa scrolling through other people's happy lives, waiting for something to happen. And then, out of nowhere, something actually did. Someone, for whatever particular reason, rang her doorbell. She wondered for a moment if she shouldn't get to the door at all. She was, after all, already in her night clothes, even though it was only 9 p.m. This is, like, very, like, ominous how each section, at least so far, we've only read 2 sections, but how they're beginning. She was, after all, already in her night clothes, even though it was only 9 p.m. She felt self-conscious about her oversized eco-warrior t-shirt, and her tartan pajama bottoms. She put on her slippers to be slightly more civilized and discovered that the person at the door was a man, and one she recognized. He was tall and gangly and boyish, with a kind face, but his eyes were sharp and bright, like they could see through things. It was good to see him, if a little surprising, especially as he was wearing sports gear and he looked hot and sweaty despite the cold, rainy weather. The juxtaposition between them made her feel even more slovenly than she had done 5 seconds earlier. But she'd been feeling lonely, and though she'd studied enough existential philosophy to believe loneliness was a fundamental part of being human in an essentially meaningless universe, it was good to see him. Ash, she said, smiling. It's Ash, isn't it? Yes, it is. What are you doing here? It's good to see you. A few weeks ago, she'd been sat playing her electric piano, and he'd run down Bancroft Avenue, and had seen her in the window here at 33A, and given her a little wave. He had once, years ago, asked her out for a coffee. Maybe he was about to do that again. It's good to see you too, he said, but his tense forehead didn't show it. When she'd spoken to him in the shop, he'd always sounded breezy, but now his voice contained something heavy. He scratched his brow, made another sound, but didn't quite manage a full word. You running? A pointless question. He was clearly out for a run, but he seemed relieved momentarily to have something trivial to say. Yeah, I'm doing the Bedford half. It's this Sunday. Oh, right. Great. I was thinking of doing a half marathon, and then I remembered I hate running. This had sounded funnier in her head than it did as actual words being vocalized out of her mouth. She didn't even hate running, but still she was perturbed to see the seriousness of his expression. The silence went beyond awkward into something else. "You told me you had a cat," he said eventually. "Yes, I have a cat." I remembered his name. Voltaire. Ginger Tabby? Yeah, I call him Volts. He finds Voltaire a bit pretentious. It turns out he's not massively into 18th century French philosophy and literature. He's quite down to earth. You know, for a cat. Ash looked down at her slippers. "I'm afraid I think he's dead." "What?" "He's lying very still by the side of the road. I saw the name on the collar. I think a car might have hit him. I'm sorry, Nora." She was so scared of her sudden switch in emotions right then that she kept smiling, as if the smile could keep her in the world she had just been in, the one where Volts was alive and where this man she'd sold guitar song books to had rung her doorbell for another reason. Ash, she remembered, was a surgeon, not a veterinary one, a general human one. If he said something was dead, it was, in all probability, dead. "I'm so sorry." Nora had a familiar sense of grief. Only the sertraline stopped her crying. Oh God. She stepped out onto the wet cracked paving slabs of Bancroft Avenue, hardly breathing, and saw the poor ginger-furred creature lying on the rain-glossed tarmac beside the curb. His head grazed the side of the pavement, and his legs were back as if in mid-gallop, chasing some imaginary bird. Oh, Volts. Oh, no. Oh, God. She knew she should be experiencing pity and despair for her feline friend, and she was. But she had to acknowledge something else. As she stared at Voltaire's still and peaceful expression, that total absence of pain, there was an inescapable feeling brewing in the darkness. Envy. Oh, this is really dark. Namjoon, what are you reading? Okay. String theory. Yeah. I feel like there should have been, like, a warning before the beginning of this book. And I totally get anyone who, isn't comfortable with this and needs to not follow along. Yeah. From flipping ahead just to see where things are going, I'm sure that it ends up being okay, like, ultimately, but just in the immediate future of, like, where we're planning to go today, not super happy. I mean, I guess we should have known when it starts off with a Sylvia Plath quote. But, let me see. I'm finding it I'm actually, like, skimming ahead right now just so I can find a place to stop for today. Just because I really didn't expect there to not be chapters in this book. I expected it to be broken up in chapters, and now it's like, no, section by section, which will go on for, like, maybe a page or two, we have a little divider. So, I'm gonna put a little, card sleeve in there where I believe we'll stop for today. Once again, like, if anybody finds this uncomfortable and does not want to listen along or anything like that, please feel free to turn off. It's totally fine. This subject matter is heavy. Aww. I would appreciate that. But yeah, so this subject matter is very heavy, so, like, and again, where we're going, it doesn't sound super positive, at least yet. So absolutely, if for your well-being, you feel the need to turn off, absolutely go ahead and do so. So, this next section is entitled String Theory. 9.5 hours before she decided to die, Nora arrived late for her afternoon shift at String Theory. "I'm sorry," she told Neil, in the scruffy little windowless box of an office. "My cat died last night, and I had to bury him. Well, someone helped me bury him. But then I was left alone in my flat, and I couldn't sleep, and forgot to set an alarm, and didn't wake up till midday, and then had to rush." This was all true, and she imagined her appearance, including makeup-free face, loose makeshift ponytail, and the same second-hand green corduroy pinafore dress she had worn to work all week, garnished with a general air of tired despair, would back her up. Neil looked up from his computer and leaned back in his chair. He joined his hands together and made a steeple of his index fingers, which he placed under his chin, as if he was Confucius contemplating a deep philosophical truth about the universe rather than the boss of a musical equipment shop dealing with a late employee. There was a massive Fleetwood Mac poster on the wall behind him, the top right corner of which had come unstuck and flopped down like a puppy's ear. "Listen, Nora, I like you." Neil was harmless. A 50-something guitar aficionado who liked cracking bad jokes and playing passable old Dylan covers live in the store. "And I know you've got mental health stuff. Everyone's got mental health stuff. You know what I mean." "I'm feeling much better generally," she lied. It's not clinical. The doctor says it's situational depression. It's just that I keep having new situations. But I haven't taken a day off sick for it at all. Sick for it all. Apart from all my mom. Yeah. Apart from that. Neil sighed. When he did so, he made a whistling sound out of his nose, an ominous B flat. "Nora, how long have you worked here?" 12 years, and she knew this too well. 11 months and 3 days. On and off. That's a long time. I feel like you are made for better things. You're in your late 30s. I'm 35. You've got so much going on for you. You teach people piano. One person. He brushed a crumb off his sweater. Did you picture yourself stuck in your hometown working in a shop? You know, when you were 14? What did you picture yourself as? 14? A swimmer. She'd been the fastest 14-year-old girl in the country at breaststroke, and second fastest at freestyle. She remembered standing on a podium at the National Swimming Championships. "So, what happened?" She gave the short version. "There was a lot of pressure." "Pressure makes us, though. You start off as coal, and the pressure makes you a diamond." She didn't correct his knowledge of diamonds. She didn't tell him that while coal and diamonds are both carbon, coal is too impure to be able, under whatever pressure, to become a diamond. According to science, you start off as coal, and you end up as coal. Maybe that was the real-life lesson. She smoothed the stray strand of her coal-black hair up towards her ponytail. What are you saying, Neil?" "It's never too late to pursue a dream." "Pretty sure it's too late to pursue that one." "You're a very well-qualified person, Nora. Degree in philosophy." Nora stared down at the small mole on her left hand. The mole had been through everything she'd been through, and it just stayed there, not caring. Just being a mole. Not a massive demand for philosophers in Bedford, if I'm honest, Neil. You went to uni, had a year in London, then came back. I didn't have much of a choice." Nora didn't want a conversation about her dead mom, or even Dan, because Neil had found Nora's backing out of a wedding with 2 days' notice the most fascinating love story since Kurt and Courtney. We all have choices, Nora. There's such a thing as free will. Well, not if you subscribe to a deterministic view of the universe. But why here? It was either here or the Animal Rescue Center. This paid better. Plus, music. You were in a band with your brother. I was. The Labyrinths. We weren't really going anywhere. Your brother tells a different story. This took Nora by surprise. Joe? How do you... He bought an amp. Marshall DSL 40. When? Friday. He was in Bedford? Unless it was a hologram. Like Tupac. He was probably visiting Ravi, Nora thought. Ravi was her brother's best friend, while Joe had given up the guitar and had moved to London for a crap IT job he hated, Ravi had stuck in Bedford. He played in a cover band now, called Slaughterhouse 4, doing pub gigs around town. Right. That's interesting. Nora was pretty certain her brother knew Friday was her day off. The fact prodded her from inside. I'm happy here. Except you aren't. He was right. A soul sickness festered within her. Her mind was throwing itself up. She widened her smile. I mean, I am happy with the job. Happy as in, satisfied. Neil, I need this job. You are a good person. You worry about the world. The homeless, the environment. I need a job. He was back in his Confucius pose. You need freedom. I don't want freedom. This isn't a non-profit organization, though I have to say it is rapidly becoming one. Look, Neil, is this about what I said the other week? About you needing to modernize things? I've got some ideas of how to get younger No, he said defensively. This place used to just be guitars. String theory, get it? I diversified. Made this work. It's just that when times are tough, I can't pay you to put off customers with your face looking like a wet weekend. What? I'm afraid, Nora. He paused for a moment about the time it takes to lift an axe into the air. I'm going to have to let you go. To live is to suffer. Gosh, it's so it's so happy and positive so far. I don't mean to be obnoxious about it either. I'm just like, wow, we're just continuing, right? Yeah. Weird tangent, but this reminds me of 2 points actually in Buffy is what I was thinking about. There's not to spoil too much, but there's a point near the end of season 2 where things just keep going wrong and wrong and wrong and getting worse. So it sort of reminds me of that, and it also reminds me of there's a point in season 5, which is very similar to that, but not so outright stated. In season 2, they actually kind of call attention to the fact that just more and more things are falling away. But definitely it feels like we reached there in 5 too. I'm gonna take some water, and then we can continue reading on. Hold on. I'm this much of a nerd that I have another card protector here, so I'm gonna put it there to hold my spot for now. Hold on. Okay. Yes, to live is to suffer. 9 hours before she decided to die, Nora wandered around Bedford aimlessly. The town was a conveyor belt of despair. The Pebble Dash Sports Center, where her dead dad once watched her swim lengths of the pool, the Mexican restaurant where she'd taken Dan for fajitas, the hospital where her mom had her treatment. Dan had texted her yesterday. Nora, I miss your voice. Can we talk? D. X. She'd said she was stupidly hectic, big LOL. Yet it was impossible to text anything else, not because she didn't still feel for him, but because she did, and couldn't risk hurting him again. She'd ruined his life. My life is in chaos, he told her via drunk text, shortly after the would-be wedding she pulled out of 2 days before. The universe tended towards chaos and entropy. That was basic thermodynamics. Maybe it was basic existence, too. You lose your job, then more shit happens. The wind whispered through the trees. It began to rain. She headed towards the shelter of newsagents with a deep, and, as it happened, correct, sense that things were about to get worse. Great! Worse. Doors. 8 hours before she decided to die, Nora entered the newsagents. Sheltering from the rain? The woman behind the counter asked. Yeah. Nora kept her head down, her despair growing like a weight she couldn't carry. Yeah, A National Geographic was on display. As she stared now at the magazine cover, an image of a black hole, she realized that's what she was. A black hole. A dying star collapsing in on itself. Her dad used to subscribe. She remembered being enthralled by an article about Svalbard, the Norwegian archipelago in the Arctic Ocean. She'd never seen a place that looked so far away. She'd read about scientists doing research among glaciers and frozen fjords and puffins. Then, prompted by Mrs. Elm, she decided she wanted to be a glaciologist. She saw the scruffy, hunched form of her brother's friend, and their own former bandmate, Ravi, by the music mags, engrossed in an article. She stood there for a fraction too long because, when she walked away, she heard him say, Nora? Ravi, hi. I hear Joe was in Bedford the other day? A small nod. Yeah. Did he, did you see him? I did, actually. A silence. Nora felt his pain. He didn't tell me he was coming. It was just a flyby. Is he okay? Ravi paused. Nora had once liked him, and he'd been a loyal friend to her brother. But, as with Joe, there was a barrier between them. They hadn't parted on the best of terms. He'd thrown his drumsticks on the floor of a rehearsal room and dropped out when Nora told him that she was out of the band. I think he's depressed. Nora's mind grew heavier at the idea her brother might feel like she did. He's not himself, Ravi went on, anger in his voice. He's going to have to move out of his shoebox in Shepherd's Bush, well, with him not being able to play lead guitar in a successful rock band. Mind you, I've got no money either. Pub gigs don't pay these days, even when you agree to clean the toilets. Ever clean pub toilets, Nora? I'm having a pretty shitty time, too, if we're doing the Misery Olympics. Ravi laughed. A hardness momentarily shadowed his face. The world's smallest violin is playing. She wasn't in the mood. Is this about the labyrinths? Still? It meant a lot to me, and to your brother, to all of us. We had a deal with Universal, right, there, album, singles, tour, promo. We could be Coldplay now. You hate Coldplay. Not the point. We could be in Malibu. Instead, Bedford. No, your brother's not ready to see you. I was having panic attacks. I'd have let everyone down in the end. I told the label to take you on without me. I agreed to write the songs. It wasn't my fault I was engaged. I was with Dan. It was kind of a deal breaker. Well, yeah, how did that work out? Ravi, this isn't fair. Fair. Great word. The woman behind the counter gawped with interest. Bands don't last. We'd have been a meteor shower over before we started. Meteor showers are fucking beautiful. Come on, you're still with Ella, aren't you? And I could be with Ella and in a successful band. With money. We had that chance. Right there. He pointed to the palm of his hand. Our songs were fire. Nora hated herself for silently correcting the R to my. I don't think your problem was stage fright. Or wedding fright. I think your problem was life fright. This hurt. The words took the air right out of her. And I think your problem, she retaliated, voice trembling, is blaming others for your shitty life. He nodded as if slapped, put his magazine back. See you around, Nora. Tell Joe I said hi, she said as he walked out of the shop and into the rain. Please. She caught sight of the cover of Your Cat magazine, a ginger tabby. Her mind felt loud like a Sturm and Drang symphony. Sturm and Drang symphony. As if the ghost of a German composer was trapped inside her mind, conjuring chaos and intensity. The woman behind the counter said something to her she missed. Sorry? Nora Seed? The woman, blonde bob, bottle tan, was happy and casual and relaxed in a way. Nora no longer knew how to be, leaning over the counter on her forearms as if Nora was a lemur at the zoo. Yep. I'm Carrie Ann. Remember you from school, the swimmer, Superbrain. Didn't what's-his-face, Mr. Blandford, do an assembly on you once? Said you were going to end up at the Olympics? Nora nodded. So, did you? I gave it up. Was more into music at the time. Then life happened. So, what do you do now? I'm between things. Got anyone then? Bloke? Kids? Nora shook her head, wishing it would fall off, her own head, onto the floor, so she never had to have a conversation with a stranger ever again. To be fair, that's me with most conversations with strangers. That's just how conversations with strangers are. That's not about depression. Well, don't hang about. Tick-tock, tick-tock. I'm 35. She wished Izzy was here. Izzy never put up with any of this shit. And I'm not sure I want... Me and Jake were like rabbits, but we got there. 2 little terrors, but worth it, you know? I just feel complete. I could show you some pictures. I get headaches with phones. Dan had wanted kids. Nora didn't know. She'd been petrified of motherhood, the fear of a deeper depression. She couldn't look after herself, let alone anyone else. Still in Bedford then? Mm-hmm. Thought you'd be one who got away. I came back. My mom was ill. Aw, sorry to hear that. Hope she's okay now. I better go. But it's still raining. As Nora escaped the shop, she wished there was nothing more. She wished there were nothing but doors ahead of her, which she could walk through one by one, leaving everything behind. How to be a black hole. Seven hours before she decided to die, Nora was in free fall, and she had no one to talk to. Her last hope was her former best friend Izzy, who was over 10,000 miles away in Australia, and things had dried up between them, too. She took out her phone and sent Izzy a message. Hi, Izzy, long time no chat. Miss you, friend. Would be wondrous to catch up. X. She added another X and sent it. Within a minute, Izzy had seen the message. Nora waited in vain for 3 dots to appear. She passed the cinema, where a new Ryan Bailey film was playing tonight, a corny cowboy rom-com called Last Chance Saloon. Ryan Bailey's face seemed to always know deep and significant things. Nora had loved him ever since she watched him play a brooding Plato in the Athenians on TV. And since he'd said in an interview that he'd studied philosophy, she'd imagined them having deep conversations about Henry David Thoreau through a veil of steam in his West Hollywood hot tub. Go confidently in the direction of your dreams, Thoreau had said. Live the life you've imagined. Thoreau had been her favorite philosopher to study, but who seriously goes confidently into the direction of their dreams? Well, apart from Thoreau. He'd gone and lived in the woods, with no contact from the outside world, to just sit there and write and chop wood and fish. But life was probably simpler 2 centuries ago, in Concord, Massachusetts, than modern life in Bedfordshire. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe she was just really crap at it. At life. Whole hours passed by. She wanted to have a purpose, something to give her a reason to exist. But she had nothing. Not even the small purpose of picking up the Banerjee's medication, as she had done 2 days ago. Mr. Banerjee, sorry. She tried to give a homeless man some money, but realized she had no money. Cheer up, love. It might never happen, someone said. Nothing ever did, she said to herself. That was the whole problem. Antimatter. Yeah, I know, right? This freaking story. Antimatter. 5 hours before she decided to die, as she began walking home, her phone vibrated in her hand. Maybe it was Izzy. Maybe Ravi had told her brother to get in touch. No. Oh. Hi, Doreen. An agitated voice. Where were you? She'd totally forgotten. What time is it? I've had a really crap day. I'm so sorry. We waited outside your flat for an hour. I can still do Leo's lesson when I get back. I'll be 5 minutes. Too late. He's with his dad now for 3 days. Oh, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. She was a waterfall of apologies. She was drowning in herself. To be honest, Nora, he's been thinking about giving up altogether. But he's so good. He's really enjoyed it. But he's too busy. Exams, mates, football. Something has to give. He's a real talent. I've got him into bloody choppin', please. A deep, deep sigh. Bye, Nora. Nora imagined the ground opening up, sending her down through the lithosphere and the mantle, not stopping until she reached the inner core, compressed into a hard, unfeeling metal. 4 hours before she decided to die, Nora passed her elderly neighbor, Mr. Banerjee. Banerjee. Mr. Banerjee was 84 years old. He was frail, but was slightly more mobile since his hip surgery. "It's terrible out, isn't it?" "Yes," mumbled Nora. He glanced at his flower bed. "The irises are out, though." She looked at the cluster of purple flowers, forcing a smile as she wondered what possible consolation they could offer. His eyes were tired, behind their spectacles. He was at his door, fumbling for keys. A bottle of milk in a carrier bag that seemed too heavy for him. It was rare to see him out of the house, a house she had visited during her first month here to help him set up an online grocery shop. "Oh," he said now, "I have some good news. I don't need you to collect my pills anymore. The boy from the chemist has moved nearby, and he says he will drop them off." Nora tried to reply, but couldn't get the words out. She nodded instead. He managed to open the door, then closed it, retreating into his shrine to his dear dead wife. That was it. No one needed her. She was superfluous to the universe. I'm going to interrupt this moment of absolute utter chaos and despair, and just mention also, I love the description of, he managed to open the door, then closed it, retreating into his shrine to his dear dead wife. Because, like, while that is also a very sad image, it's a very, like, interesting way to think about, like, the home of someone who used to be with someone for so long and then that person's passed away. It must be like that. Like, I've never heard it described like that, but it just, you can feel it, you know? It's funny because, like, it kind of comes so casually. That's it. There's no more lines about it. And in fact, she goes back on thinking about her own feelings and stuff, which is okay. I'm not trying to call her, like, you know, vain or anything like that, but, it's just something that is there. It is like a truth, and then we move on. Very interesting. Once inside her flat, the silence was louder than noise. The smell of cat food. A bowl still out for Voltaire, half eaten. She got herself some water and swallowed 2 antidepressants and stared at the rest of the pills, wondering. 3 hours before she decided to die, her whole being ached with regret, as if the despair in her mind was somehow in her torso and limbs, too. As if it had colonized every part of her. It reminded her that everyone was better off without her. You get near a black hole, and the gravitational pull drags you into its dark, bleak reality. The thought was like a ceaseless mind cramp, something too uncomfortable to bear, yet too strong to avoid. Oof. Sorry, I just wanted to read what was in the chat. Yeah, I could totally see that. But, I mean, there was also probably, like, pictures of them together and, like, that. Like, you could just picture it really well. I think it might mean something different for everyone, but at the same time, it's such an understandable metaphor. Like, shit, depressing. That's, see, I know it's really hard to open up about how, like, crappy you're feeling, especially if you're feeling that low. But it's really important, I think, to be transparent, because I feel like even if she and her former best friend had fallen out, if she, like, again, I know it's hard to be so forthcoming with how you're feeling, but I feel like if she had been honest about the extent to what she was feeling, if she'd said, I need help, or something like that, I feel like, her friend would have been less likely to not answer or to ignore her message. Because, I mean, I know not too many people are even watching this, but I'll say, like, friends that, or people that I haven't talked to in years, or, like, we were never close. If someone messaged me talking about that, like, saying that they were in a dark place, or, you know, anything like that they were in danger to themselves or anything, I don't care how close I was to them, how much I knew them, or how little, I would be there to talk to them, even if we parted on bad terms. Because that's not something anyone... It's so easy to feel alone in a situation like that, even if you're actually not alone. That, like, anything counts. You know? This is part of the reason why I feel like mental health needs to be so much less stigmatized. I mean, that sounds, like, pretty self-explanatory and pretty, obvious. But, like, I feel that if we were more open, like, these moods are actually incredibly common, as shitty as that is. And I feel... Siri, no. My Siri activated for some reason. And I feel like if there was less stigma behind saying, I'm feeling suicidal right now, I'm feeling, like, you know, something like that, and just coming out with it, that it would be easier to get help, obviously, because I feel like not too many people in their right mind, decent people in their right mind, would just overlook that. Again, regardless of relationship, regardless of closeness, regardless of anything like that. And then, on top of that, I feel like if there's less shame involved with the way you're feeling, that I feel like a big part of the intensity of things is that shame. So if that shame isn't there, that would be really helpful. And also, a problem is that a lot of us do not open up before it gets that bad. Or we feel like we have to be to an incredible level of depression to even talk about things, or to even try. And it's not the case, but I feel like if we put less negative stigma on if we put less stigma on just being emotionally hurt, or having those emotional weights on our chest, and being forthright about them, like, because I feel like the general feeling is you're being a burden when you talk about these things, or something like that. And those thoughts don't come from nowhere. Yeah. But, like, those, like, they may be exaggerated, the feeling of being a burden in opening up, but that general idea of me talking about my problems, talking about this stuff, being a burden, annoying, that stuff is formed externally and then internalized. So my general... I should be waiting for the end of the session to, like, talk about things, but I just had to talk about this. I just feel like, yeah, the whole system, we all need to really just change how we think about things, and thankfully I feel like things are moving in the right direction. It's just taking time. Thank you. I just don't want to hold people up if they're waiting to move on. Sorry, I heard something that distracted me. Okay. Where are we? Yeah, okay. Yet too strong to avoid. The thought was like a ceaseless mind cramp, something too uncomfortable to bear, yet too strong to avoid. Nora went through her social media. No messages, no comments, no new followers, no friend requests. She was antimatter, with added self-pity. She went on Instagram and saw everyone had worked out how to live, except her. She posted a rambling update on Facebook, which she didn't even really use anymore. 2 hours before she decided to die, she opened a bottle of wine. Old philosophy textbooks looked down at her, ghost furnishings from her university days, when life had still had possibility. A yucca plant and 3 tiny, squat, potted cacti. She imagined being a non-sentient life form sitting in a pot all day was probably an easier existence. She sat down at the little electric piano, but played nothing. She thought of sitting by Leo's side, teaching him Chopin's Prelude in E minor. Happy moments can turn into pain, given time. There was an old musician's cliche about how there were no wrong notes on a piano, but her life was a cacophony of nonsense. A piece that could have gone in wonderful directions, but now went nowhere at all. Time slipped by. She stared into space. After the wine, a realization hit her with total clarity. She wasn't made for this life. Every move had been a mistake, every decision a disaster, every day a retreat from who she'd imagined she'd be. Swimmer, musician, philosopher, spouse, traveler, glaciologist, happy, loved. Nothing. She couldn't even manage cat owner, or 1 hour a week piano tutor, or human capable of conversation. The tablets weren't working. She finished the wine. All of it. I miss you, she said into the air, as if the spirits of every person she loved were in the room with her. She called her brother and left a voicemail when he didn't pick up. I love you, Joe. I just wanted you to know that. There's nothing you could have done. This is about me. Thank you for being my brother. I love you. Bye. It began to rain again, so she sat there with the blinds open, staring at the drops on the glass. The time was now 22 minutes past 11. She knew only one thing with absolute certainty. She didn't want to reach tomorrow. She stood up. She found a pen and a piece of paper. It was decided. A very good time to die. There is a note here. We're continuing past that note, where it seems like the story will actually get moving, but that is, yeah. It's like really raw. Again, previous warnings and, messages apply that should you not want to, be watching and listening along for this, should you feel like, I'm sorry, should you feel like for your safety or anything that it is better for you not to listen along, please go ahead and tune out. We will be back with, I know we're not in a happy place right now, but we will be back with Hot Devil Boyfriend on, we're not stopping right now, but I just wanted to say we will be back with happier, more lighthearted material as well on next Saturday. Even though we're in a kind of serious place in Hot Devil Boyfriend too. But we will be there where things are like less lonely, if that makes sense. However, like I said, again, please prioritize yourself. If this is just unpleasant to listen to and you don't want to listen to it, feel free to go. And absolutely prioritize your own safety and your own feelings. If you'd like to stay, I will continue. We're going to be continuing on for, in my book, it is about 7 more pages. So we're going to be getting through maybe like a couple of different sections next. But just to let you guys know. Dear whoever, I had all the chances to make something of my life, and I blew every one of them. Through my own carelessness and misfortune, the world has retreated from me, and so now it makes perfect sense that I should retreat from the world. If I felt it was possible to stay, I would. But I don't. And so I can't. I make life worse for people. I have nothing to give. I'm sorry. Be kind to each other. Bye, Nora. We move on to a section called 0 o'clock. Well, it's like 000000, but... At first, the mist was so pervasive that she could see nothing else until slowly she saw pillars appear on either side of her. She was standing on a path, some kind of colonnade. The columns were brain gray with specks of brilliant blue. The misty vapors cleared, like spirits wanting to be unwatched, and a shape emerged. A solid, rectangular shape. The shape of a building, about the size of a church or a small supermarket. It had a stone facade, the same coloration as the pillars, with a large wooden central door and a roof which had aspirations of grandeur, with intricate details and a grand-looking clock on the front gable, with black-painted Roman numerals and its hands pointing to midnight. Tall, dark arched windows, framed with stone bricks, punctuated the front wall, equidistant from each other. When she first looked, it seemed that there were only 4 windows, but a moment later there were definitely 5 of them. She thought she must have miscounted. As there was nothing else around, and since she had nowhere else to be, Nora stepped cautiously towards it. She looked at the digital display on her watch. 0 o'clock. Midnight, as the clock had told her. She waited for the next second to arrive, but it didn't. Even as she walked closer to the building, even as she opened the wooden door, even as she stepped inside, the display didn't change. Either something was wrong with her watch, or something was wrong with time. And the circumstances, it could have been either. What's happening, she wondered. What the hell is going on? Maybe this place would hold some answers, she thought as she walked inside. The place was well lit, and the floor was light stone, somewhere between light yellow and camel brown, like the color of an old page. But the windows she had seen on the outside weren't there on the inside. In fact, even though she had only taken a few steps forward, she could no longer see the walls at all. Instead, there were bookshelves. Aisles and aisles of shelves reaching up to the ceiling and branching off from the broad open corridor Nora was walking down. She turned down one of the aisles and stopped to gaze in bafflement at the seemingly endless amount of books. The books were everywhere, on shelves so thin they might as well have been invisible. The books were all green. Greens of multifarious shades. Some of these volumes were a murky swamp green, some a bright and light chartreuse, some a bold emerald, and others the verdant shade of summer lawns. And on the subject of summer lawns, despite the fact that the books looked old, the air in the library felt fresh. It had a lush, grassy, outdoors kind of smell, not the dusty scent of old tomes. The shelves really did seem to go on forever, straight and long towards a far-off horizon, like lines indicating one-point perspective in a school art project, broken only by the occasional corridor. She picked a corridor at random and set off. At the next turn, she took a left and became a little lost. She searched for a way out, but there was no sign of an exit. She attempted to retrace her steps towards the entrance, but it was impossible. Eventually, she had to conclude that she wasn't going to find the exit. This is abnormal, she said to herself, to find comfort in the sound of her own voice. Definitely abnormal. Nora stopped and stepped closer to some of the books. There were no titles or author names adorning the spines. Aside from the difference of shade, the only variation was size. The books were of similar height, but varied in width. Some had spines 2 inches wide, others significantly less. 1 or 2 weren't much more than pamphlets. The description of the library actually kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you guys have seen The Page Master. Oddly enough, I'm thinking about that right now. There was like an old, it's an old movie now. That's a really weird realization to just, like, have as you're saying it. But, so in The Page Master, it's actually a movie that starts out live action. And it's about a kid who basically is going through a rough time and runs away to this library. And, in the library, he finds this, if I remember correctly, because it's been a while, he finds this weird book and opens it, and, like, this crazy thing happens with the book that for some reason transforms where he is, and suddenly the library seems endless. And I think that is when it becomes animated. And then he finds some books that are, like, sentient, and they help him through a journey where they actually go inside other tales, and look for a way to get him back home. I'd like to find that again. It was a good movie. It's like, I don't want to say it's a kid's movie, but I think it was more like a family movie. It was with Macaulay Culkin back when he was a kid. So that'll tell you how old it is. But, yeah. Okay. Why did I stop reading, like, just a couple of lines to the end of the page? She reached to pull out one of the books, choosing a medium-sized one in a slightly drab olive color. It looked a bit dusty and worn. Before she had pulled it clean from the shelf, she heard a voice behind her, and she jumped back. "Be careful," the voice said, and Nora turned around to see who was there. The librarian. Yeah, Patrick Stewart was in it. Whoopi Goldberg was in it. I remember that Leonard Nimoy was in it. I can't remember a lot of the other actors, but yeah. "Please, you have to be careful." The woman had arrived seemingly from nowhere, smartly dressed with short gray hair and a turtle green polo neck jumper. About 60, if Nora had to pin it down. "Who are you?" But before she had finished the question, she realized she already knew the answer. "I'm the librarian," the woman said coyly. "That is who." Her face was one of kind but stern wisdom. She had the same neat cropped hair she'd always had, with a face that looked precisely as it always did in Nora's mind. For there, right in front of her, was her old school librarian. Mrs. Elm. Mrs. Elm smiled thinly. "Perhaps." Nora remembered those rainy afternoons playing chess. She remembered the day her father died, when Mrs. Elm gently broke the news to her in the library. Her father had died suddenly of a heart attack while on the rugby field of the boys' boarding school where he taught. She was numb for about half an hour and had stared blankly at the unfinished game of chess. The reality was simply too big to absorb at first, but then it had hit her hard and sideways, taking her off the track she'd known. She had hugged Mrs. Elm so close, crying into her polo neck until her face was raw from the fusion of tears and acrylic. Mrs. Elm had held her, stroking and smoothing the back of her head like a baby, not offering platitudes or false comforts or anything other than concern. She remembered Mrs. Elm's voice, telling her at the time, "Things will get better, Nora. It's going to be all right." It was over an hour before Nora's mother came to pick her up, her brother stoned and numb in the back seat, and Nora had sat in the front next to her mute, trembling mother, saying that she loved her, but hearing nothing back. "What is this place? Where am I?" Mrs. Elm smiled, a very formal kind of smile. "A library, of course." "It's not the school library, and there's no exit. Am I dead? Is this the afterlife?" "Not exactly," said Mrs. Elm. I don't understand." "Then let me explain." The Midnight Library. As she spoke, Mrs. Elm's eyes came alive, twinkling like puddles in moonlight. "Between life and death, there's a library," she said, "and within that library, The shelves go on forever. Every book provides a chance to try another life you could have lived, to see how things would be different if you had made other choices. Would you have done anything different if you had the chance to undo your regrets? So I am dead? Nora asked. Mrs. Elm shook her head. No. Listen carefully. Between life and death. She gestured vaguely along the aisles, towards the distance. Death is outside. Well, I should go there. Because I want to die. Nora began walking, but Mrs. Elm shook her head. That isn't how death works. Why not? You don't go to death. Death comes to you. Even death was something Nora couldn't do properly, it seemed. It was a familiar feeling, this feeling of being incomplete in just about every sense, an unfinished jigsaw of a human, incomplete living and incomplete dying. So why am I not dead? Why has death not come for me? I gave it an open invitation. I'd wanted to die. But here I am, still existing. I'm still aware of things. Well, if it's any comfort, you are very possibly about to die. People who pass by the library don't usually stay long, one way or the other. When she thought about it, and increasingly she had been thinking about it, Nora was only able to think of herself in terms of the things she wasn't, the things she hadn't been able to become. And there really were quite a lot of things she hadn't become. The regrets which were on permanent repeat in her mind. I haven't become an Olympic swimmer. I haven't become a glaciologist. I haven't become Dan's wife. I haven't become a mother. I haven't become the lead singer of the Labyrinths. I haven't managed to become a truly good or truly happy person. I haven't managed to look after Voltaire. And now, last of all, she hadn't even managed to become dead. It was pathetic, really, the amount of possibilities she had squandered. While the Midnight Library stands, Nora, you will be preserved from death. Now, you have to decide how you want to live. And I think that is where we might stop for today. Let me know how you feel, if that's a good stopping point. Because we can stop and discuss. Yeah, I'm actually enjoying it too. Like, it's dark, but I don't like... I'm wondering if we should keep going. That sounds like a good place to stop. We can stop here. We will be doing it other weeks. I think what I'll do then is, for upcoming weeks, what I'll do is I'll label, in my little, like, notifications for my streams, I think I will mention where we're starting and where we'll be ending. So this way, anybody who has to miss one or wants to jump in the middle, they'll know what we're up to. And can either, like, read to that if they know that they won't be able to come in, or, you know. Is there anything that you guys, like, want to talk about specifically? Anything that stood out to you? Personally, I had a feeling that Mrs. Elm was going to be significant from the beginning of the story. What's it called? So seeing her again probably was supposed to be more surprising than it actually was, but I just had a feeling for some reason. Like, I was surprised at the start that she wasn't the librarian of the library, you know? Of this library yet. So seeing her again now, I was like, oh, okay. Interesting. I think that's too assumptive that she would make it past this. though. Perhaps. Yeah, I think that's what we're going to discover in the library itself, but manning the library, I think it'd be too... I think that too, I was gonna say, or would that be too, like, on the nose to push her to keep living? But I do think that the librarian is not actually Mrs. Elm. It's just when she thinks of a librarian and as a comforting figure in her life, I think that that is who she pictures. So that's who this librarian is taking the form of for Nora. I'm gonna lower the desktop audio just a little. I just feel like we're breaching, I keep going into the yellow with it when I'm just talking normally, so... I was really sad about the kitty. That was, I think, like, one of the saddest, parts for me. No, me either. Do you guys have anything that stuck out to you? Yeah. Yeah. So the descriptions of the book I want to touch on first because so I feel like Neil Gaiman is usually a little more flowery than this. I really like it, but I feel like his descriptions are a little more flowery, but at the same time this is very Gaiman-esque somehow. I feel like. Yeah, her boss... to touch on, like, her having to lose everything, sometimes it feels like that. Like, sometimes it's just, like, when it rains, it fucking pours. Like, when it rains, there's a monsoon. Yeah, so... I totally get that. Like, she talks about it being a period of entropy and just everything, like, falling apart. And I feel like there's definitely... It's very weird how that happens, and I do wonder if that's, like, a perspective thing, or if that is just genuinely a thing that does happen, where, like, things tend towards chaos at certain moments. Like, I definitely have had times like that, where it just feels like everything is falling apart. And everything chooses a specific moment to fall apart. And I do wonder if that's just because, since I'm down, I'm looking at that, as opposed to, like, looking at more positive stuff. Like, the stuff that has actually not fallen apart. And that is kind of something that she touches on. Like, I don't think she realizes that there's, like, a point where she almost, like, addressed the distortion that, like, depression does to you mentally. But she mentions, like, she had only been thinking of herself in terms of what she hadn't become and what she couldn't do. And I feel like depression just makes you do that. Like, it doesn't let you think about anything that you've got going well. Anything that you're, you know. And it paints everything negatively in your head. Even if you do manage to find a positive thing, your depression goes, yeah, but, and somehow makes that negative too. Are you talking about the boss? The boss is like, yeah, he was like, again, you could tell he thought he was doing her a favor, but he also was not listening to her at all. I feel like you have to at least listen to her, and if she's not good for business, like, yes, you do have to be an employer, and you maybe have to let her go, but especially when she's been there for that long, maybe listen to what she's saying, and especially if she's just genuinely, like, she's done a better job in the past. I feel like you can't just be like, well, you're out, you know? I feel like he should have given her some notice, like, at least, like, a week or so, couple weeks. Not just immediately been like, okay, well, you have to leave now. Yeah, it's very hard to do that, though, when you're, depressed, to think positively instead of negatively, because, like I said, when you're depressed, your brain takes even the positive things and paints them negatively. So if you think, like, oh, but, like, let's say a person who has a job, you think, like, oh, at least I have employment. At least there's that. And then your brain goes, yeah, but our job sucks. Or, like, we hate our job. And then there's also, like, it just does that. If you're picking up a new skill and you're like, I've done this, I have this going on, then your brain goes, yeah, but we suck at it, though. Or something, you know, like, it's just this constant negative voice. That's, just pervasive and loud. Yeah. Constructive criticism, it all takes analysis, right? I feel like there are times when people are just not in a good spot for even constructive criticism, because you can label, like, objectively something can be constructive, but if that person is in a place like dealing with depression, then they could take, it's gonna be hard for them to hear, like, the bad is always going to weigh more heavily than the good in a state like that. So, constructive criticism, you first have to find out if the person that you're talking to is in a place to hear it, and then you kind of have to choose how you say what you say carefully, because like I said, that the negativity is going to weigh much more than the positivity. So you could say something like, you've improved a lot since you started. You still need some work, but you've improved a lot. So I think a depressed person, a lot of times that's gonna sound like, I'm still not good. But I'm just better than where I was. I was crap before, and now I'm, like, mud, you know? But I think there'd be a way to, like, phrase it that might help a person who is going through the depression, but it's very, tricky. And that's not to say that you should treat people with depression as like landmines or anything like that, but there are definitely times that are stickier for anybody than others. Like, so generally their baseline could be that they're really good at handling constructive criticism and stuff like that. But when they're off, they might not be, so you might have to be a little more careful around them. I don't want to say careful, because careful doesn't sound right, but like a little more thoughtful. Careful sounds like it's for your own safety, if that makes sense. You have to be careful around them versus thoughtful. Depression is hard to deal with for the people who are going through it, for sure, and then also for the people who are, like, you know, like, have to actually coexist with a person who is dealing with it. Like, that doesn't sound right. Even saying that doesn't sound right, but, like, it is something that kind of sucks for everyone. It doesn't just affect the person who's going through it. The person who's going through it is going through probably the hardest time, but it does affect people on the outside of it as well. Kindness, yeah. You know. Empathy. Those are the things that are really important. And, you know, not everybody can do that at the drop of a hat. It's not easy necessarily like to deal with this stuff, even if you're on the outside of it. But I feel like that's why I feel like being upfront about things is like really important to just to be able to say, even if you're a person on the outside, that you can't maybe be the support that person needs at that moment. Now, that's not what we're talking about with the boss here. The boss is just kind of... the boss was just kind of, like, as she mentioned, his Confucius pose. Like, thought that he was doing her a favor and was being this, like, deep thinker. But actually, like, wasn't at all listening to what she was saying she needed. Is there anything else that you guys... Oop, pulled out a headphone and got Nageki out of the frame for a second there. And is there anything else that you guys thought about? I'm excited to see where this goes too. I wonder if we're going to jump right into things or... Yeah, I guess. But there's something to say about, like, loyalty to your employees, especially when they've been with you for, like, she mentioned, like, 12 years? 12 years? $12? Like, come on. Have some humanity. You're a boss, but you're also a human. Yeah, I'm excited too. I have a feeling that it'll be less depressing come next time. Right, exactly. Sometimes what? Yeah, I sure hope so. Why did that remind me of the whole road work meme? Road work ahead. I sure hope it does. You're welcome. I mean, bosses are, sometimes bosses are humans. Are human, rather. Sometimes they're, egotistic, money-hungry aliens that just look human. But yeah, it looks like, I mean, based on where we've been, I would have to say that things can only go up from here. Alien boss. I'm curious. How did that go? How did you discover that they were one of those aliens? If you would like to share your experience. Did you find them, like, devouring a soul? Or a cash register? I guess. I mean, I don't know. I feel like... Yeah, I guess they're... I don't know. It's not an excuse to not be human. I feel like that's something that... And I've mentioned this before. Not here. But, this idea of where the situation with workers nowadays actually is. Of a lot of people quitting their jobs because their jobs are just not treating them fairly. And a lot of people are not, putting up with that anymore. It makes me think of, like, I know it might be slow, but my theory of the future is that eventually we're going to be moving towards a lot more individually run businesses. And, like, ultimately, I feel like there are going to be new companies created with, like, worker welfare in mind. Because that's just the idea of sticking with something that is providing you with something, like, just treating you unfairly, not allowing you, like, a wage that you can actually even live with, is becoming something that people are just not, like, settling with anymore. I feel like the pandemic has really, like, I feel like it was sort of happening before that, but the pandemic was really a wake-up call to a lot of people that, like, they were, like, living to work in jobs that treated them like absolute crap, with employers that did not give a shit about them. And that's what sparked this whole thing. And ultimately, it's a good thing. It's just, I feel like to make substantial change, it's gonna possibly be a while. But I'm optimistic. Well then, do we have anything else left to talk about? Yeah, of course. You have the price of living going through the roof. Prices of things in general just rising exponentially, and then wages staying completely static. Yeah. How did we get here? If we got nothing else for this week, we can end here. You guys can enjoy your evening. And we can come back next week. I don't know if this is going to be the time for this, or the day. We'll see how it works for everybody doing Sundays at 5. And personally for me, if it's manageable after doing the Saturday stream, we'll see about it. We'll see. Right now, I think it's going well. I think that this is something sustainable, especially, well, we'll see. We'll see. But, I think for now we are going to be staying at Sunday at 5. If there's any change at all, of course, I will be letting everybody know through social media. But otherwise, thank you guys for tuning in. We will go ahead and continue next week, Sunday at 5 p.m. Don't forget, we also have our How to Have a Boyfriend stream Saturday at 5 p.m. And this is the book we'll be reading. Have to remember my directions again. Continuing to read on Sunday, next Sunday at 5 p.m. I'll go ahead and let you guys know where we got up to this time, so this way you're aware for where we should start next time. And, yeah, thank you guys for reading along or listening along and enjoying. This has been Sky. Bye-bye!